Now, welcome to our session on what's new with Azure Data Factory. Today, this session will be presented by Linda and myself, Hyong. And we hope to share with you some of the latest capabilities that have been shipped in Azure Data Factory over the past 7 months. We hope this session will be useful to you. And before we get into the specific of Azure Data Factory and what's new with Azure Data Factory, we just want to thank the community for working with the Azure Data Factory team over the years, for all your feedback and for all the interactions that we had, whether it's at product roundtables, whether it's at Ask Me Anything. This feedback has helped us a lot in getting Data Factory to where it is today. Now, before we get into what's new with Azure Data Factory, for many of you who have been with us on the Azure Data Factory journey over the many years, these are the 4 tenets for Azure Data Factory. Now, whether it is using code-free ETL or ELT, leveraging, for example, data flows capabilities in Azure Data Factory, to if you are been using SSIS for a long time, and the ability for you to just rehost SSIS with a few clicks, and to some of the improvements that we have made around enabling you to have source code control with many of the popular Git repository. This is very important to us. And of course, the second pillar that is really important to the Azure Data Factory team is really the cost effectiveness. From pay-as-you-go to having an infrastructure that's fully managed, that's serverless, that's ready as and when you need it, and the ability for it to scale on demand to meet your most at scale needs for data movement and data integration, we're there for you. Now, the third pillar, which is really important to us, is we continuously make progress in growing the number of built-in enterprise connectors. And as many of you know, Azure Data Factory connectors are license-free, right? Meaning, you just specify the connectors that you want to use, and you just leverage it to connect to either on-premises data sources that's on Azure, data sources that's on multi-cloud, as well as to many of the SaaS providers that's out there, like Salesforce, Macchiato, and so on and so forth. And at the same time, we provide you with really rich orchestration and monitoring capability that allows you to keep track of all your data pipelines that are running 24/7 in production, but more importantly, being able to orchestrate this for you at an amazing scale. Now, the last pillar, which is also an area that we continuously strive in, is Azure Data Factory being intelligent, us being able to leverage many of the AI ML capabilities and be able to spin up infrastructure for you on demand and making sure that it's ready for you when you need it. But at the same time, if you use copy, you also see that there's a lot of AI built in enabling you, right, to be able to move data with the best throughput and being able to move data at an amazing scale. Now, the last piece of it is our integration with the AI platform. Today, using Azure Data Factory, you are able to now build predictive pipelines that allows you to connect with models that you have deployed in AI or platform, or specifically Azure Machine Learning, and be able to run this inference at an amazing scale. Now, again, for those that is new to Azure Data Factory, this quickly summarizes some of the concepts that many of you are familiar with, whether it's pipelines, being a grouping of activities. Now, the activities could be a copy activity, it could be a data flow activity, and having some of this activity running on an integration runtime. Now, you could leverage a self-hosted integration runtime, which give you line of sight to on-premises data sources, or data sources that's in your VNet, or the Azure integration runtime that will spin up for you that allows you to connect to many of the Azure services. Now, trigger is something that many of you are familiar with as well, whether it's from on-demand trigger to scheduled trigger to being able to express data dependencies between different kinds of windows, if you will, to event trigger. All this are provided out of the box for you. Now, we took all these concepts and many of the use cases that Azure Data Factory support, and we gave a challenge to one of the designers from the developer relations team. And we said, well, can you condense all of Azure Data Factory concepts into a single slide. Now, and what you see here is essentially, the challenge accomplished. And thank you to Nitya from the developer relations team. She took all of Azure Data Factory documentation on Azure Docs and turned this into a one-page poster, if you will, that allows you to understand all of Azure Data Factory in one single page. Now, this is also available to you on Azure Docs, but at the same time, available for you to be download, but more importantly, be able to put it, at where you need it most. Now, you can go to Azure Docs under Azure Data Factory Introduction to get access to the high-resolution version of this PDF. Now, let us take a quick recap of Azure Data Factory and some of the product update that was made in 2020. We kept this slide because we wanted to give you a single slide to show you whether it's from ingestion, data preparation and transformation, to authoring and monitoring experiences. We have made significant improvements. And as we started off this presentation, all these improvements would not have been possible without the contribution and the feedback from the community. And so we just want to say a thank you. Now, from an ingestion perspective, whether it's supporting the common data model or supporting both Azure Database for PostgreSQL, the REST connector or sync, all this is now out of the box available to you, and they are all generally available. Now, we get a lot of asks on Delta Lake support in Dataflow, and at the same time, being able to take advantage or leverage on many of the capability that Delta Lake provides. For example, whether it is auto-compact or to optimize. All this is now supported out of the box without you having to spin up a Databricks cluster. Now, at the same time, we've been continuously making progress in Snowflake support, XML support, or if you simply work with Excel file, be able to just specify which worksheet do you want to pull the data from. Now, we get a lot of asks on building more resiliency into the data ingestion capabilities. And so whether it's from fault tolerance for copying binary files or ensuring that there's a data consistency verification for copy, all this out of the box is provided for you. Now, the other ask that we get asked a lot is, when you use a copy activity in Azure Data Factory, to be able to enable session log, and that allows you to troubleshoot, when things goes wrong. Now, on the data prep and transformation front, whether it's data flow improvement from improving the debug runs with just-in-time cluster, being able to deal with things like row-level errors, controlling the location of the temporary files, or simply enable you to use cache lookup for improving the performance of data flow, and many new transformation that are out of the box available for making you and providing you with the capability for transforming data at an amazing scale. Now, on the SSIS front, we continue to make significant progress, whether it's using SSIS IR and using the self-hosted IR as a proxy for SSIS IR. This is now supported today. Or even when you want to do express custom setup on SSIS IR using Azure PowerShell, again, this is supported out of the box. Now, on the Databricks front, we added richer authentication, including the support for MSI auth. Now, with respect to improving authoring and monitoring experience, whether it's the management hub for monitoring, all the way to continuously improvement on how you could build expressions in Dataflow, or just being able to manage large amount of source, transform, and syncs in Dataflow, and be able to zoom in and out and find the kind of specific components that you need, if you will. All this has been we're continuously making significant progress there. Now, support for global parameters, as well as support for array parameters, is also included as well. Now, last year, towards the end of last year, we added support for time zone for scheduled trigger. And at the same time, we also make available the cancel action for tumbling window trigger. Now, this quickly brings us to 2021 at a glance, and we're going to cover a lot of this or spotlight several of these capabilities immediately. Now, whether it's ADF and the Purview integration, support for dual standby for Azure SSIS IR, all the way to being able to support you to get from one end of a CI/CD pipeline to the other end without you having to do any manual step. So we added support for automated publishing improvements, which we'll also cover in the spotlight later. At the same time, we get a lot of asks on, well, can we enforce enterprise policies on the Azure Data Factory that has been created in a subscription? And so out of the box now, we support about 7 to 8 Azure policy that allows you to control and enforce certain policies that's important to your organization. In 2021, early part of 2021, we renamed event trigger for block created and block deleted as storage event trigger. And at the same time, you also see later on in the spotlight that allows us now to be able to support event trigger for any kind of arbitrary business event that has been put onto the event grid. Now, one top ask that we get asked a lot is, if a factory pipeline goes wrong, or part of a factory pipeline goes wrong, can you send email or can you send a notification to a Teams channel that allows me and my team to be aware of, whether something failed or whether something is successful? Now, we provide this guidance for you in the link that's provided here. Now, support for always encrypted when using copy activity and when using Azure SQL, Azure SQL MI, and SQL Server, this has just been added. We also added rich authentication support for connecting to Azure Data Explorer, SFTP, REST, and HTTP. Now, we continue making significant progress in connecting to Azure SQL database for MySQL. And in order to make sure that you have the best cost saving, we introduced reserve instant pricing for data flow. And so if you have reserve instant pricing for 1 year all the way up to 3 years, you get significant cost saving. We added SQL stop procedure as a data source option for data flows. And we're continuously making progress in the kind of path transformation that's available, including path transformation for both JSON, XML, delimited text string. And as I shared with you earlier, right, support for auto-compact, optimized right for writing data to ADL Gen 2 using Delta Lake is now supported out of the box. Now, we also know and understand, and we hear a lot of feedback that sometimes when you have multiple data flows in a pipeline, you want to have the cluster to start up really quickly. And so we added support not just for data flow cluster fast startup, but at the same time, we also allow you to reuse the cluster. Now, that quickly brings us to something that we launched recently in the early part of July, which is now, if you log on to your Azure Data Factory studio, if you will, you immediately see this beautiful Azure Data Factory homepage that was designed with accessibility in mind. But more importantly, it is meant, and the design is meant as a way to help you to be productive. Whether you're looking at new creation of new pipelines, new data flows, new exercise activity in a pipeline, and so on and so forth, the new allows you to get to it immediately. But at the same time, we added support for, showing you what the recent resources that you have used, because then that allows you to get to resources or pipelines that you've been working on and immediately to get back to where you have started or where you're left off the pipeline. Now, to learn more, you can go to the link that is provided here. Now, one other thing that's top of our mind is making sure that, we have a list of partners that will enable you to either do migration to Azure Data Factory or to do projects that are implementing Azure Data Factory as part of a bigger data solution that you're building. And so out of the box right now, you see some of the early launch partner that we have as part of the Azure Data Factory Partners Gallery.
Thanks, Wei-Xiong, for the overview. So next, we'd like to share more details in some selective areas regarding some new features that will have been added into the Azure Data Factory recently. So first of all, let's start with the data ingestion. As you know that Azure Data Factory enables you to bring data from various data sources into Azure for data integration needs. It covers almost all the Azure data services, the common databases, data warehouse, NoSQL stores, file-based systems, SaaS applications, and we also offer the generic protocol connectors as one way to reach even more data stores. So currently, you can find almost 100 connectors built in Azure Data Factory that can help you bring data from different sources. So you can find the latest supported connector list and capabilities in both the documentations and also in the ADF authoring UI. We keep enhancing the connectors and adding more connectors into the service. So next, we'd like to talk about the Azure Preview and Azure Data Factory integration. So this capability brings together the data integration and data governance to help you really derive tremendous insights from the data catalog, data lineage, data governance, and many more. So to double click into that, Azure Preview is a unified data governance service that help you manage and govern the data assets sitting on-prem, in the cloud, in multi-cloud, in SaaS applications, etc. So Preview provides a comprehensive data governance capabilities like data map, data catalog, data governance policies, etc. While Data Factory enable you to build the data integration pipelines, the integration between the two services are twofold. So once you connect the Data Factory with a Preview account, on one hand, when you execute the pipelines, ADF will push both the assets information along with the lineage information into the connected Preview account. This helps you generate a holistic data map from, you can see that where is the data source, what is the corresponding data process steps that happened against that data source, and what is the output, the locations, and all, etc. On the other hand, once you populate the data catalog in the Preview, in ADF, you can also search to discover those Preview assets. For example, if you use the data scan in Preview to scan some of your data sources, in the ADF, you can discover those assets to explore the data, to see the properties, and also to use those data assets inside the ADF to build the data integration pipelines. So next, we'd like to show you a quick demo regarding how ADF and Preview are integrated together. So here I have a data integration, Contoso data ingestion factory that is connected to the Contoso Preview account. To establish the connection, actually, you can just connect this to a Preview account. You can browse from your subscription or enter manually of the resource IDs. So in this factory, I have one pipeline, which is to ingest data from different SQL Server tables into the ADF Gen2 files. This is just a metadata-driven pipeline to look up the table list and invoke a for each with the copy activities. So once this pipeline is run, so you can easily monitor the lineage reporting status. So in the pipeline monitoring page, you can see a lineage status columns here. It indicates whether the lineage push for this specific execution is succeeded or not. And I have another factory, it's called the data analysis. In this factory, I also connect to the same Preview account. And in this factory, I have a data flow execution. So inside this data flow, it joins two tables, actually two files in the ADF Gen2, and do some aggregation and output the result set into a SQL table. I also executed this data flow. It will provide the similar monitoring experience as showed previously. So let's see what got pushed into the Azure Preview. So this is the connected Preview account. If I can browse the assets from here, I can see there's some lineage or assets information got pushed from the Azure Data Factory. I can see there's two factories. If I click into that, I can see the pipelines, the activities. So with this, you can see the different properties of this data flow activity being executed. What is the last runtime, the status, and most importantly, you can see the data lineage informations as this. So in this way, you can see that this specific data flow activities touch upon two ADF Gen2 files and output this into the SQL tables. And even more interestingly, I can also see that how the data is being sourced from the upstream. So this is the other copy activity in the other data factory that copy data from the SQL table into this ADF Gen2 files. In addition, I can also see the column level lineage. For example, I choose the output datasets of this SQL table. I can see it has a sum total column that is all the way sourced from this original SQL table. I have another customer ID column that is sourced from a different table. So with this holistic data map, I can easily tell that, for example, I can do the impact analysis. If from the upstream, I want to touch upon or change this column, I can know which downstream process or downstream datasets may be impacted. And also I can do the root cause analysis. For example, if I see this copy data activity failed with a fail marker here, I know that, okay, maybe the downstream datasets is not very up to date. So this is how ADF push the lineage information into the preview. And if I switch to the ADF, I can, on top of the search bar, I can see that I can search from the preview to discover the preview assets, or I can search the local assets inside the factory. So if I search from the preview assets, for example, I want to search if I have anything related to the sales information, I can discover the different preview assets from the connected preview account. I can search filter by the asset type and by different classification, content type, etc. So say I want to see more details regarding one of the assets. I can click into that to see the properties, schemas, and if I'm interested into that, I can also use these assets in this data factory to create new link service or to create datasets or data flows. I can create a datasets which will automatically utilize the properties or utilize these datasets where it is sourced from. So in this way, I can in the data factory to use and explore, discover the preview assets as well. Switch back to the presentation. So next, we'd like to talk about another topic, which is the Power Query with the ADF. So in ADF, we also enable Power Query experience or Power Query activity to let citizen integrators to use this familiar Power Query UI to do the data preparation and data wrangling. So next, let's see another quick demo regarding how to use the Power Query inside ADF. Let's switch to another data factory. So this is the ADF authoring UI. So once you click this Add button, you can see that you can new a pipeline, new a data flow, or new a Power Query. So to new a Power Query, you can select or new some source dataset, which points to your original source data. So I already have a Power Query pre-configured. Let's switch to that. So once you point to your source data, it will load the data, and this is your familiar Power Query experience. Let's enlarge it a bit. So with that, you can see the different data profiling or value distributions regarding different columns. And there you can easily add more transformations to remove column, derived column, change data type, etc. So those are just the embedded Power Query experience inside the Azure Data Factory UI. So in this example, we do some filters. For example, we choose only the 60 months of this specific columns. I can change the column types. I can uppercase some of the taxes, values in some of the columns. So in this way, you just use the Power Query experience to do the transformation, while along you can easily see how the data got reshaped or converted. So once you think this is a desired result set, the next thing you can do is you can new a pipeline, and inside the pipeline, you can add a Power Query activity. For this Power Query activity, you just choose the Power Query that you just configured. And also you can choose when to execute this Power Query, which IR it is used. This is quite similar as how you configure the data flows. You can choose the compute type and the core count as well. And also you can choose for that result set where you want that to land. In this example, we write that result set into an Azure SQL table. So that's all to configure the Power Query activity. Once you finish configuration, you can just add the trigger now, or add some scheduled trigger to invoke this periodically. So underneath, ADF will convert that Power Query and run that in a managed Spark cluster, just like how Dataflow does. So this Power Query activity provides a different user interface, which is more friendly to the data citizen data interpreter during the authoring, while it's still leverage the big compute that is managed underneath for the best scale and performance. So some other areas regarding the data flows, we keep enhancing the data flow for rich transformation as well. One of the features that worth mentioning is the cluster fast startup. So when you configure the Azure IR, which empowers the execution of data flow, you have an option to configure the TTL, the time to live, and also an option called quick reuse. With this new knob, you can actually start the data flow in seconds. So what happens underneath is, you know that data flow is running on a managed Spark cluster. When you configure the quick reuse option, it indicates or tells ADF that to maintain or keep that Spark cluster during that TTL time period. So when the subsequent data flow execution coming in, it can immediately start on that live Spark cluster with the fast startup time you can see here. Some other features being added to data flow, we keep adding new transformations and new expressions to fulfill your diverse data transformation needs. One example showed here is the parse transformation. This transformation have a capability that if you have a column in the format of or in the shape of JSON, dynamic text, or XML, with the parse transformation, you can extract data from that column and derive into multiple other columns. Then you can use those columns in the subsequent data transformations or add transformations to further manipulate those columns to derive new insights. Some new features around trigger as well. So ADF provides various ways to help you invoke a pipeline or invoke a workflow. It includes the scheduling trigger or tumbling window trigger, or it can be triggered on demand. We also provide the event-based trigger. One is the storage event trigger that once a blob got created or deleted, it can invoke a workflow. And something new got added is called custom event trigger. So ADF integrate with the event grid that you can create a custom topic in event grid and let Data Factory subscribe to that topic. So once new event coming in, ADF listen to that and it can invoke a new workflow or invoke a new pipeline. So this way, ADF provides you more flexible ways to really start the pipeline executions. Next, let's talk about the CI/CDs with Azure Data Factory. So ADF provides intuitive UI, kind of drag and drop UI for you to construct the pipelines or data flows. While we also notice or learn that for enterprise customer, the source control or the ability to achieve continuous integration and continuous delivery is very important. So Azure Data Factory integrate with Azure DevOps and also the GitHubs to provide such capabilities. So you can configure a Data Factory to link that in with the DevOps account or GitHub. So all those underlying code artifacts can be stored there. And also you can trigger automatic deployment across different environments to propagate the same configuration across from the dev to QA and to the production environments. So underlying, it leverages the ARM template deployments as well. So one thing got added, one feature got added recently is the automatic publishing for ADF CI/CD. So in which way that you can configure Azure DevOps pipeline to achieve a workflow that once a commit got merged into your collaboration branch, do a code validation and automatically generate the ARM templates and also create the release pipelines and deploy the ARM templates to the corresponding ADF environments. In this way that you don't need any human interaction nor the UI interaction to really achieve the continuous deployment or continuous delivery of your ADF configurations. So next, let's also talk about some new areas regarding the Azure policy integration. So ADF integrate with Azure policy to provide some built-in policy definitions to help you ensure the resource consistency, the regulatory compliance, and also the securities. Some example being, you can once you configure the policies, you can enforce the Data Factory to only use Azure Key Vault as the credentials store. That you can your end data engineers cannot use any inline credentials when building the data pipelines. Or you can say that all the Data Factories got deployed must disable the public network access. Or for example, it has to be bundled with a Git repository, or it can only use the connectors that being that in your allow list, or etc. So once you go to the policy definition tab, like shown on the screen, you can discover a dozen built-in policy definitions and use those policies to enforce the resources. And also you can use similar ways to build your customized policy definition to achieve the policy enforcement with your own needs. Last but not least, we'd like to talk about the secure and managed data integration. So Azure Data Factory support managed virtual network and managed private endpoints. So when you configure the Azure IR, you can have the option to turn on the managed virtual network configuration, in which way that when Azure IR is used to execute any activity, the Azure IR will be provisioned in a managed virtual network, and it can leverage the managed private endpoints to securely connect to your data stores. So you can, on the ADF UI or programmatically, you can create managed private endpoints against any like this Azure data stores or other data stores, and let the Azure IR, the VNet Azure IR, to use those to connect to your data stores. This provides the secure data access and also really the isolated data execution environments to really provide enterprise-grade security guarantees.
Thank you, Linda, for the presentation and some of the demos that you showed earlier, whether it's integration with Purview or integration with Power Query. Now, before we close off this presentation, I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that, one of the top of mind and one of the things that comes up very frequently in any conversations that we get into is performance tuning. We often get asked a lot, how do you get the best performance from doing data ingestion? Or how do I get the best performance when using data flow? Now, thanks to a lot of the feedback from the community, we've created 2 performance tuning guides, one which is for copy, one which is for data flow, and the links are all provided here. And hopefully with all these guides, and it will help you learn how to tune and your copy and data flow for optimal performance. And we want to continuously hear from the community how we can do better. Now, the other things that many of you might not be aware is ADF comes with pre-built templates. At the same time, you could also publish your own templates that will allow you to reuse some of the pipelines that you have built in the past. Now, using the ADF template gallery, you can jumpstart any of your data integration projects really, really quickly. Now, other things that we've been building over the years is the ADF YouTube channel has a whole set of rich training videos that's available to you for free for you to learn about new features that we've just shipped, or being able to understand the internals of some of these features that you have come to use on an everyday basis. We continue showing participating in Azure Friday in order for you to pack all the contents that's needed for you to get started on some of the latest and greatest in Azure Data Factory. Now, earlier this year, we collaborated with the Azure SQL team to create an Azure Data Factory and Azure SQL 24 hours. Now, all the videos and all the training videos that's been created as part of the February event is now available to you on demand. Now, you can visit this URL that is shown on the screen to have access to this playlist that shows you some of the top of mind content, if you will, for both Azure SQL and Azure Data Factory. Now, the last I wanted to leave you with is your journey to success with Azure Data Factory. Now, to us, it's very important for you to be able to get started with Azure Data Factory if you're new to the product. And if you're already an expert to the product, to be able to work with you, learn from you, but at the same time, making sure that we have the resources for you to not only just understand the basics of Azure Data Factory, but also understand the deep internal details of Azure Data Factory. Now, here we show you a 4-week training program. Now, today, if you go to ak.ms/adf/Azure Learn, you actually get access to even more training content on Azure Learn that will allow you to get started. Now, more importantly, all this training content is designed, right, as a way for you to not just learn the product, but as a way to help you, right, together with many of the other Azure Learns module, to be able to then, help you gain the necessary knowledge, right, in order to achieve one of the Microsoft certification for an Azure data engineer. Now, last but not least, first of all, thank you to the Data Platform Geeks, SQL Server Geeks team for giving us this opportunity to talk about Azure Data Factory and what's new with Azure Data Factory. And we'll leave you with this slide as we say thank you. Thank you for attending our session on what's new with Azure Data Factory. And here, thanks to the organizer, right? There's different ways to win prizes in DPS 2021. And we hope that through this session, we've given you an update on what's new in Azure Data Factory and things that are exciting that you should really check it out immediately after this session. Now with that, thank you. and we'll go to Q&A. Thank you, everyone.